All right, so the sun's not shining, but at least it's daylight. So we're back working again. It was a long day yesterday, but we knocked out a bunch of stuff. Today, I'm working on the starter molding up at the top of the beverage center here. I'm gonna get that done first. Gotta get that secured. We use the shims to kind of push it down away from the ceiling and get it in close contact with the frame of the cabinet. You can see there's a little bit of gap on the in between the starter molding and the cabinet there, and that's really not a factor of our installation. It's just the top of the cabinet wasn't perfectly straight from the factory, and you'll have little irregularities like that that you got to work with. So sometimes you got to get creative to try to work the gaps out. Worst case scenario, you can't get the gaps out, you got to do a little creative caulking to seal that up. But by the time we get it pulled together with our screws and everything, you'll barely see it. And then of course, once the doors are closed, the gap pretty much is, you can't see it at all. I mean, from down here. So at any rate, we're gonna go ahead and get that piece screwed down. I'm gonna put a couple of screws across there. Once we finish with that, I'm gonna move on to this cased opening over here, going into the butler's pantry in the back mudroom area. This is something we put off for a long time because we wanted to get everything else finished around here before we installed the case opening, in case we needed to make any wiring changes, plumbing changes, anything that we needed a chaseway for, because we got some space to work with in between here. But all that stuff's done, thankfully. So now today we're gonna go ahead and get this cased opening installed. That's really gonna finish this space out nicely. Can't wait to see what that looks like. So I'll get the casing cut down, knocked together. We'll sit it in place, probably put a couple of pins in it just to hold it. And we'll have to scribe it against the floor here to make sure we're good and tight against the hardwood floor. This is kind of a transition piece here, so there's just a little bit of a slope to it. Can't tell just by looking at it, but if we didn't scribe the casing as you're putting it in there, there'd be a little bit of a gap on one side. Be a little unsightly, and I'm anal like that, so I'm gonna go ahead and get that scribed so it fits nice and tight. So we'll get that done, and then we'll be able to put our casing up all the way around the opening. This area will be ready for the backsplash tile. And after that's done, I'm gonna go ahead and start working on crown on this wall over here. Every wall that's not getting backsplash, we can go ahead and get the crown put up. So I'll get crown done around here, around the beverage center cabinet, and then we'll tie it in over here where we left that piece hanging. And then same thing over on this wall. We'll be able to go ahead and take our crown all the way to the edge there, and then start wrapping it around the top of the cabinet here. We just won't be able to put this final piece in over here that goes back against the wall, because again, we're waiting on our backsplash to be completed first, and then we'll be able to go ahead and put our crown over top of that. That'll make it look really nice and neat. So that's what I'm gonna get worked on. So we'll knock some things out here and then catch you guys up. Okay, so we got the starter molding firmly screwed into place with some cabinet screws, got it in there nice and tight. And we've moved on to our cased opening over here, going into the butler's pantry. I started out by kind of cleaning up the area, knocking any loose nails or nails that were standing proud. Just went through and kind of trimmed off the drywall and made sure that none of that was sticking out past the studs here. So when I get my casing boards fitted, it's not going to sit in there all lopsided. What I did was I wanted to get an idea how level everything is, how plumb everything is. So I took my 6-foot level and went across the door frame. You can see I made a mark here and here, and then turned the level the other direction and went across the inside of the door frame. And what I was trying to do was find out exactly how much slope I have on this part of the floor, this transition piece, going from our slate to the hardwood. I wanted to see how level and plumb the door opening is. Wanted to find out what the total height, total width is, all down through here, before I start cutting anything, just so I can make sure that we do this once, because obviously these aren't pieces that you can go get off the shelf at the box store. These are pieces that were custom made for us by our local supplier, because they are super wide. So they took poplar boards and joined them together into one big board, made these nice pieces for us. Amber got them all painted out. So what I did was got a total height and found out what would work across the opening here, because again, it slopes a little bit there. So I wanted to find out what the biggest board is that I could put in here, and got that measurement about 83 3/4. So I cut these boards to 83 3/4. Now I'm going to sit them in place, pin them with our 23 gauge pin nailer. Put a couple of pins in them just so they don't flop around. Once I get them in there good and square and plumb, and then I'll be able to take my carpenter's pencil across the bottom and actually scribe it. That way I've got a good measurement there, and we can see exactly what we need to trim off to get it to sit in there nice and flush with the floor. So let me go ahead and set that in place, put a couple of pins in it, and then we'll go ahead and scribe our line on this one. So let's go ahead and put a couple of pins in it. So now we've got this gap to contend with down at the bottom. And it's probably about quarter, maybe 3/16 of an inch here at the bottom. So what I'll do is take my carpenter's pencil, which just happens to be a 1/4 inch wide, and lay it on the flat and then pull that across the board. And it looks like that's not quite high enough. So instead I'm going to put it on the long side. That looks pretty good actually, so a little more than a 1/4 inch. So we'll just draw that across the wood here, and that'll give us a perfect line across the bottom. Pull that one more time. Really not much trimming at all on this first board, and then once we get to the second board, that's when we start to see the transition. So, shouldn't be too bad. I'll be able to trim that off fairly easily, I think. So, I'll go ahead and knock that loose, break the pins off, and take it outside, trim it, bring it back in here and fit it one more time. Hopefully that'll look good, and we'll move on and do the other side. All right, so this is where we ended up after scribing. I used a combination of the compound miter saw and then the sanding disc on the grinder to remove the extra material from the backside. And you can see we got it pretty good. We're in contact all the way across there. Levels out right there on the edge of the slate. Levels out there on the floor on the other end there. So real happy with that one. Now we're going to move to the other side here. Get that one up, get it scribed. Repeat the same process over here. Once we've got both of them up, I'm going to go ahead and go to the top here. Take another level line and transfer the marks to our boards on both sides. And then I'll take them back out to the table saw and actually cut a mortise in the top to receive the top piece that goes across the frame. That way we know, with it sitting on bottom, scribed in and sitting nice and tight, that our header will be nice and level once we get the mortises in the right spot. So it's a process, but it's going to make it look just good and happy and good and happy. Is that even a thing? It's going to make it look really good, right, babe?
Yeah.
Okay, we got our other side in place now. Got it good and plumb in all directions. Nice and even with the wallboard. And down here at the bottom, same situation as on the other side. Had to break out the carpenter's pencil and do a scribe across the bottom there to make it sit nice and flush with our floor. Otherwise, you can see we'd have a big gap on this side and it'd be tight on this side, so it'd be very unsightly if you didn't scribe it. So we'll take it back outside and use the compound miter saw and our sanding disc. Go ahead and do a nice neat job on the scribe there, bring it back in and see how it fits. All right, so I put the table saw on an angle and shaved off some of this and then grabbed the grinder with the flap disc and finished off the rest of it. Had to touch up the front just a hair and then come back down here and then follow that dip down in against the back piece of wood and then came up just slightly to meet the slate floor. So we'll take that inside and see how that fits. All right, so I'm working on cutting the mortise for the top here. And what we're doing is just using the stop on the saw here. You can set that to different depths. And by doing so, you won't cut all the way through the piece. And then you just kind of move the piece in incrementally. Shave a little bit off, shave a little bit off, shave a little bit off. You see the saw is not quite big enough to get all the way to the edge. So I'll have to do that last little piece by hand and clean that little bit up by hand as well. Not a big deal though. I'll just take my coping saw or even just a carpenter saw. A good sharp saw can straighten that up. So I'm going to do that by hand, and then I'll take that one back inside and we'll do our next piece. All right, so looking through the tool bin for something to finish up this cut, I discovered my Japanese pull saw. This is the thing I used when we were fitting the appliances into the cabinets and everything. It saw a lot of service for that. It's great for doing real fine cuts. You've got a 17-point tooth count on one side and a 7 on the other, so you can do some really detailed work with this. It's super thin, very flexible, and it's a pull saw, so it only cuts in one direction. If you look carefully at the teeth, they curve back, so it just allows you to have more control. So I use that to go ahead and finish up our mortise on the end of the board here. It turned out pretty nice. It's not like you're making cabinetry. It doesn't have to look perfect, but you do want it to look pretty good because you know, that's where your pieces are going to meet in the corner. Some of it gets covered up with your casing, but some of it will be exposed. So you got to keep it pretty sharp, keep it pretty neat. So I got that one done. I'm going to go ahead and take it inside, sit it in place, and bring the other one out here and do the same thing. All right, so we got our mortise cut in the top of both pieces now, and we've got the piece on this side spaced out with some pieces of 1x4. And the reason I did that is we needed clearance for our boxes on both sides of the doorway there. We've got switch boxes on both sides, so we wanted to make sure we had plenty of room for the trim to fit next to the switch plates. So I've got it pretty much where I want it. I've got everything shimmed out, got it plumb. Didn't put any shims on the top there, just in the middle. But what I'm going to do is double check all my measurements, and then I'll slip up here to the top and measure from mortise to mortise and figure out exactly how long I need my header piece. And then I'll be able to go ahead and get that cut, install that. That'll fit in there nice and neat, and we'll be able to go ahead and pin the whole thing together. And it'll be ready for some casing. It's gonna look awesome. All right, so we got the header put in place, and it fit in nicely in those mortised ends, and got everything shimmed out, made sure it was plumb in all directions, made sure the header was level, and then went ahead and used some 16 gauge finish nails through the shims, hold everything in place. And again, you can see where we spaced it out a little bit on this side to give us some more clearance around our switch boxes. But everything fits nicely. And I think once we get the trim and everything up there, it's going to look really, really good. So that's the next step. We're going to go ahead and get the door opening cased on both sides. And then we'll be able to go ahead and finish our baseboards in here, baseboards in the kitchen, get all that stuff knocked out.
Get an action shot of Chris here. Pretty tight joint.
Yes, ma'am. Only the best for you.
Be careful it doesn't get you.
I like to nail these joints together.
Yeah.
This pen nailer keeps them from ever walking.
Right.
Sometimes you just gotta beat the snot out of them.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it looks beautiful.
Little sandpaper work, little caulking.
It'll be good.
Good to go.
I like
Yeah,
it.
looks good to get that done, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Really does.
Whew.
Yeah, good work.
Thank you.
Now the other side.
Yes.
Well, finish this nail on the bottom here, right?
Yes.